Welcome to Discs of Diamond. In this series, we look back on old forgotten gems to try and make them shine once again. Are graphics really everything, or is that being too narrow-minded? Can the visual presentation make a game from the older era still stand out? Is the step up to the third dimension necessary, or did we already peak with the second? And what is it like to work on a game that your industry doesn't even want? This is Skullmonkeys.
A bad man fell from the sky.
In 1996, the Neverhood was released. It was an adventure game developed for the PC, and the first one done by the newly formed studio, the Neverhood Inc., and published by also newcomer company DreamWorks Interactive. Being helmed by Dr. Nabel, certified madman on the heel of the highly acclaimed Earthworm Jim series, the Neverhood is par for the course in regards to its absurdity, unique charms and groovy music. Its most striking feature is of course its graphical style, being entirely made out of clay. The idea of a world born just from plasticine was something Doug had played with all the way back in 1988, and after having left Shriney Entertainment upon finishing up Earthworm Jim 2, he decided it was his chance to see that vision come to life. Getting together a group of 12 friends, bringing over a few from Shriney Entertainment, he formed his own studio, which he announced just 2 weeks later at that year's E3. He had approached Steven Spielberg, yes, that Steven Spielberg of all people, with the idea to make a game composed entirely out of claymation, with the prospect of getting it released under the man's newly formed company, DreamWorks Interactive, which was in dire need of new and interesting projects.
What would you do if Steven Spielberg walked up to you and said, "Welcome. I've chosen you to direct our next project, so welcome to the studio."
And so, the team of friends that had no experience developing for the PC, doing stop-motion animation, or even making a puzzle game, went on to make a stop-motion animated puzzle game for the PC. Doug was the only person who had done anything with clay before, but animator Mike Dietz, aka Ditch Digger, says that the stop-motion animation community was apparently very friendly about sharing information, to much contrast against the video game industry where any single thing is under heavy padlocks. But after a year's time of work, they finally released their first game to the masses. I have a lot of things I could say about the Neverhood, but plenty of people have already talked about it to death already, so I don't want to bore you with all that. I'll just keep this brief. The team wanted to create something unique and innovative, and they succeeded. For its time, and even today, it's hard to compare it with any other adventure game, both in terms of graphics and gameplay. The puzzles in the game are more akin to fiddling around with foreign machines you have no idea what are going to do, rather than standard use screwdriver on screw type of inventory puzzles.
Oh, it needs a key.
Oh, perhaps.
The key. Hey, great!
Characters like...
Making the player feel like they are truly exploring an alien world, strung together by Myst-esque first-person sequences, beautifully handcrafted cutscenes, and backed up by Terry S. Taylor's wonderfully mumbly music. It's a joy to play through for anybody patient enough looking for one of the most charming adventure games ever crafted. Critics at the time were also mostly fond of the game, praising the visuals but generally finding the puzzles lackluster. One guy at PC Gamer gave it a most hilarious review, saying, "No game has ever brought me quite as close to killing myself," in response to one of the game's more idiosyncratic design choices, ending the review with a final score of 29%. Yikes. The game was also close to winning Game Center's Game of the Year award, but lost to some other game that no one really cares about anymore. However, in spite of all this, the game sold abysmally, reportedly only selling 50,000 copies in total, though according to Mike Dietz, you should take this with a grain of salt. This was unfortunately the result of it coming out at the time when adventure games had lost the interest of the public's eye, as well as shifted towards 3D perspective gameplay, as had been pioneered by Mario 64 and Quake during the same year. So despite its visual appeal and unique take on the genre's puzzle design, the latter aspect had doomed it from the start. Doug and his team went back to the drawing board for the next game. What came out was a game completely different from the Neverhood. The adventure game genre had proven to be a bust, but the world that he and his team had created enticed him for further exploration. So now he went back to his roots with a good old-fashioned 2D platformer on the ever-growing popular PlayStation. Why a 2D platformer when 3D was on the rise? with Mario 64 and Crash Bandicoot having been released a year prior? Well, Doug made it clear that him and his team had a big disdain for 3D games, saying, "We would rather play Defender than Twisted Metal. I finished Twisted Metal and was like, that's it. I liked it, but it felt like they were trying to preserve their 3D engine and trying to fit gameplay around it." He also noted that he felt mixing 3D games with a platform was a recipe for disaster, thanks to the lacking depth perception shown off in early examples. At the same time, he was fully aware of the potential backlash this would incur. To quote, "We're probably gonna get crucified for doing this, but we want to do a game that is fun the way NES and Genesis games used to be fun. I think there's room for one very potent platform game, and that's what ours is. We're that one." And so, Doug, Mike Dietz, and Mark Lorenzen of Vectorman fame, together with Electronic Arts and DreamWorks Interactive, released in February of 1998 Skullmonkeys to, well, some fanfare. The game is pretty special in that the American copy was released with a lenticular cover for whatever reason. Not that it's the only game to have done so, and it's pretty cool all things granted, but the PAL release for some reason did not get it. Instead I have my old busted up copy of the game with just a static image, and then on the disc you got the other frame with the eye staring on back at you. I guess that was the compromise. Anyway, who cares, let's just start the game. So it opens up with the usual splash screens of the developers, which were always awesome back in the PS1 era. I remember with Medal of Honor they played around with the DreamWorks Interactive logo, but not here unfortunately. The Neverhood one was always so cool. This one always used to freak me out as a kid, though admittedly their logo nowadays is much scarier. And then we get the opening cinematic. Wait, pause right there. Just as a little prerequisite, the game is a direct sequel to the Neverhood, and while the Neverhood has a very long amount of lore and backstory, all of that is completely irrelevant to Skullmonkeys, so don't worry about that. All you need to know is that this Klogg guy is bad news and he's floating through space. He also doesn't like the Neverhood very much, which is a floating island in space, home to our hero Klaymen and his cousin Willy. I mean, clearly they're cousins, can't you tell? Anyway, this guy is floating through space, and it so happens that he manages to land on a planet inhabited by monkeys doing monkey things.
There we go.
Nice mohawk.
Look, Ma, I'm a Skullmonkey. In fact, I am Klogmonkey, the king of all Skullmonkeys.
Klogmonkey will never get away with this. My people are far too smart to accept him as leader.
I feel anytime anybody says this, they quickly get disappointed. Yeah, see?
First, we make an evil engine.
We make an evil engine. Is this the real life?
Evil engine number 9.
I have no idea what an evil engine is, but the fact that they're up to 9 can't possibly be good.
To destroy the Neverhood.
Destroy the Neverhood.
Now let's get to work.
So the only sane monkey called, Jerry O apparently, maybe he's related to Harry Joe, sends out help for the one man for the job. Our hero and his trusty cousin are caught doing what any good pair of heroes should be doing after having saved the world, enjoying a good picnic. Stop motion at its most delicious. I've never seen a more effective way to get our hero into action before. I like how the game can at least be bothered enough to give him a means of breathing in space, while at the same time having him flap his way through it with wings. That kind of shows they don't really care what you think. So then we get a look at who made the game, along with Klaymen's photo reel. I'd personally give a D- to most of these. So now that our excuse plot has been set into place, the game can finally begin. Honestly, you know you have a great game with a lot of care and attention put into it in your hands when even the title screen is fun enough to just sit and idle on. Willy also makes a little cameo if you let one of the demos play out. Whether or not you'd actually want him to show up is another matter though. Now that I've wasted enough of your time already, we can finally get into the actual gameplay. So as I've already stated, Skullmonkeys is a 2D platform on the PlayStation, and when you hear that you might be thinking, okay, so what's the gimmick? And well, there really is none. It's about as standard of a side-scroller as it can get. In fact, there's a lot of similarities to Mario at play here. You jump on enemies' heads to activate spontaneous combustion, you press a button to run faster, and you die in one hit. But you can pick up glowing halos along the way to withstand getting damaged once. Also, instead of fire flowers, you get green bullets that you can fire whenever you want, as long as you have ammo to shoot. And that's about it. You make your way to the end of the levels picking up colored balls along the way to get extra lives and try not to die. Well, it's not quite all there is to it, you'll see, but for now that's all you need to know. So how does the game actually feel to play? Well, personally I'd say the controls are pretty good. Klaymen's movement is very tight, he turns as you choose to turn. There's a certain lack of momentum that makes it easy to maneuver around. However, when you're running, the movement can get pretty finicky as he flies way too fast around on the screen, and you can easily miss your target. But that's just something you gotta learn to avoid doing all the time. They do give you a run button for a reason after all, so you can stop running of course. Also, the camera flying around when you turn can get pretty annoying. I don't mind a camera that goes a little ahead so you know what you're getting into, but when it just flies all over the place it can get a bit nauseating and hard to control. And lastly, there is one thing that is kind of annoying. Klaymen's jumps feel way too delayed. It's as if there's a slight build up for him to jump, and he first takes off half a second after you command him to. It's not a deal breaker or anything, but just so you know, if I make any stupid mistakes along the way, let's just pretend that was the reason. The game also features secrets all over the place and even keeps track of how many you've collected by the end of each world. This adds a lot of replay value and makes the levels pretty fun to explore, as secrets are full of useful items and one-ups that might become necessary down the line. There's also these things, these swirly cues. Each world has a total of 3 to collect, and if you get them all you're treated to a bonus level at the end. We'll get to that one in a minute. And lastly, one thing that's actually pretty unique about the game is that sometimes at least one level in a world will give 2 different colored blobs you can choose to jump into. One will lead to the next level being a normal difficulty version, while the red are all levels that are slightly more difficult but have a greater amount of items and one-ups to collect. So if you're feeling ballsy, then you can up the challenge a bit. As you will get to see, choosing the red blobs in some of the game's later worlds is equivalent to signing your death warrant though. This first world however is pretty easy. It's a good introduction in my book. It has a lot of non-threatening levels, simple level geometry, and a whole stage that's entirely vertical so you get comfortable with the jumping without having to lose lives on bottomless pits yet. And let's not forget the music is just already wonderful. It perfectly encapsulates that feeling of being in a strange, far-off, oppressive world where everything is out to get you. And let's not forget to mention the graphics themselves, the most standout feature of the entire game. Doug said in an interview before the game's release that it would be the most graphically unique game on the PlayStation. While there's certainly contenders for the title, and he should be happy Clayfighter 63 1/3 was an N64 exclusive. Whenever I think of beautiful 2D games that truly showcased how incredible the PS1 could look, Skullmonkeys is one that immediately springs to mind for me. While the gameplay itself is really nothing all that special, the presentation is the true star of the show here, and the cutscenes are the rewards along the way that really keep you going. But that's also why I'm making this video in the first place. A lot of people are only familiar with this game for its visual appeal and music, but there's still so much to talk about in regards to the actual gameplay, even if it is pretty formulaic, so don't worry, I'm going to cover all bases here. And that leads us to the bonus level finally. As I've already said, the bonus levels are located at the end of each world in a purple blob and are basically a heaven of goodies, but that's not important. What is important is that the music during the bonus rooms is probably one of the greatest music tracks ever put into a game.
Here's a little bonus room, 'cause I know you've had it tough. And here's a little bonus tune about collecting real cool stuff. Yes, here's a little bonus room where you can play. Don't be frightened, don't run away. You can linger, 'cause I'm your video friend. Think of me as a father figure with a hand to lend.
How many games have you played where the music is just cheering you on and being genuinely comforting?
Don't worry, take your sweet time, you need not hurry. Oh, you're looking incredible, you're the bomb. And me, I'm kinda like your dad, and a little like your mom.
So peaceful.
There are no monsters here, hey wait, look over there. I was just kidding, don't be scared.
And then how many games have you played where a random screamer comes out of nowhere from the most serene song in the soundtrack? I tried adding some crazy distortion to the video to match the audio, but part of the absurdity is how it comes out of nowhere in the most relaxing and easy levels in the game, and playing it up would just ruin the effect, which is just... why?
'Cause I'll be right there when you open your hand. 'Cause I'm your little invisible musical friend. So show me to your pets, or show me to your pals. You really will impress every nifty guy and gal. Show them you're individual, show them you are bold. Besides, I get residuals for every game that's sold. I'm your little invisible musical friend for life. I'll never leave you.
Good luck falling asleep tonight. So now we conclude the first world, but before we get on to the next one, I have something I want to quickly cover. The password system. You see, Skullmonkeys was one of those few games that still for whatever reason use passwords, when you would think the memory card should have made that system completely obsolete by now. I mean, this is 1998. One of the only games I can think of to still use passwords by that point was Crash Bandicoot, and even then, that game had both passwords and memory cards in it, which I can understand, and was very thoughtful of Naughty Dog. Memory cards weren't a great commodity back then, they were a new and expensive peripheral you had to convince mom and dad to buy. I'm sure you've all heard stories before from people who played a game over and over because they didn't have a memory card to save on. Well, when you have passwords, that's not really an issue. And to be fair, this is such a nice and simple password that doesn't really matter that much anyways. It's easy to write down or take a photo, so I don't really mind. It's just a curiosity as to why they chose this. But there is one boon as a result of it using passwords. You see, the one nice thing about passwords is that they allow the player to start at any level, regardless of if they've earned it or not. And as a kid, a fun pastime of mine was to type in random passwords in the hopes of getting lucky. I swear to God, I once actually started at the final boss and went on to beat the game, no joke. But there's something much more interesting you can do in this game in particular. Did you hear that? I just got a confirmation sound, and sent into a level. And you wanna hear the most bizarre part? This is World 0. If you beat this world, then you move on to the Science Center, which is where we were just at from starting a new game. Which means there's a secret bonus world in the game you can only access by spamming in random passwords, and eventually the game going, okay fine, here's your stupid level. Stop being so stubborn, jeez. The absolute strangest thing is that if you game over, then return to the main menu to type in the exact same password, the game says that's an invalid password. which leads me to believe they deliberately coded it so spamming in passwords through brute force would eventually land you in this extra world if you don't put in any right passwords. It's an odd bunch of levels too. It feels very barren and is full of the easiest enemies in the game. There's also just what seems like random platforms strewn about the place, and these floating blocks just kind of orbiting in the air, which are a pain in the ass to jump on, since you still carry vertical momentum when you get off them. And there's 2 teleport balls in the first area, one to the left and one all the way to the right, both leading to the next level, which has this weird statue, which I can only describe as monkeys spitting out urine from their mouths while holding onto a globe with their feet. And a well hidden secret on the left area that's a pain in the ass to get up through, since these balls require perfect timing on the button to get maximum height from. And look at how tight this last jump is, god damn! But when you finally get up, you're rewarded with a lot of goodies at least. And that's it, there's only the bonus level left, and that's all there is for Skullmonkey Gate. There's not even a congratulations, you got this many out of this many secrets, it just immediately goes on to the science center. My personal conspiracy theory is that this was just made early on in development and was originally supposed to be the introductory level, proof from it starting out right from where the opening cutscene ends, and because of its easy but bland level design. My guess is that they didn't want to cut out all of the work they put into it, so as a little bonus, they kept it in as a reward for weirdos that typed in hundreds of wrong passwords for whatever reason. I can certainly say I've never seen this kind of thing before, and it's by far the strangest thing about the entire game. But moving on, we have World 2 now, which starts out with the second strangest thing about the game. This cutscene. I'll just let it play out for you. Enjoy.
More to, better you feel. What's that bean for every meal? Bean, musical fruit. More to, better you feel. What's that bean for every meal? Just play your horn and make it toot with an SBD or a mega P. Let's do a cheer, let's give a hoot. You gotta love beans as musical fruit. Beans, musical fruit. More to, better you feel. Let's have beans for every meal. Beans, musical fruit. More you eat, more you toot. Better you feel. Let's have beans for every meal.
The best part is that this is actually introducing a new gameplay mechanic. Welcome to the Monkey Shrines, another standard keep moving to the right level. Except just like Skullmonkey Gate, this one also has 2 regular teleport balls in it for whatever reason. And one's at the very start of the stage too. I just tend to jump into that one. I mean, what could I possibly be missing out on in the rest of the level that might be important? It also introduces 2 new items. The Phoenix Hand, a relatively slow homing projectile that's really useful for getting rid of hard to hit enemies in the way. And the Fart Head. I actually really love the idea of this power up. Basically you activate it, and then if you get hit you don't lose a life, and you return to the point where you activated it at. But if you don't get hit, then after a short while you stop being green and just move on with the level as normal. So it's a way to preemptively cheat death if you know you're getting into a really difficult section. A really unique and cool power up, I gotta say. And again, this just adds to the game's charm. I mean, what other game on the PlayStation is going to let you astral project into your own farts to kill enemies from a distance? Oh. Well, Skullmonkeys did it first. We also get introduced to 2 new enemy types. These assholes that shoot their heads at you, and tempest pulsating monkeys that periodically get dangerous to bounce on. Still not invulnerable to projectiles though. Lastly, I wanna add that this world has incredible music, one of my favorite tracks in the game. It's so chill and catchy, and it fits well with this still easy lake area environment. Next up, we have this world's bonus level, which is actually unique in that it has a secret in it. 2 secrets even, one being a teleport ball to an extra secret bonus level. And get ready for a big surprise. The amazing Drivy fin is actually a vehicle level. Yeah, I bet you didn't see that one coming. Even more strange, this is the only level in the entire game where you drive in this little boat. And it's a secret level. Feels like a lot of extra effort for something most players will not even get to try out. But I guess that's what you call extra polish. Then again, this thing controls like complete ass, so maybe that's a good thing. It works like your standard tank controls, where you press a button to move forward while turning. But it feels really floaty. And you can't back up, you can only move forward, and it's a one-hit kill level where dying doesn't let you respawn. You just go immediately on to the next level, which is very fun and not annoying at all. But then again, there's a lot of goodies to collect in the level, so I guess it's fair that you only get one chance. And now it's time for our first boss fight, who is a joke and barely worth even mentioning. Like, what do you want me to say? Just look at the footage. I don't even understand what the challenge is supposed to be here if there's a platform high enough to dodge his rolls without even trying. Like, at least make it so you have to jump over him as he be rolling. Okay, so if you do waste enough time, then he shoots these puffballs out at you. But as we just saw, if you just slightly hurry, then he's over in 10 seconds. Still not as difficult as Bob the Killer Goldfish though. And now we move on to where the game actually starts to get kind of difficult. The hard boiler. I just got the joke. As I wrote it out, I literally just got. As stated, the hard boiler is where things get tricky, for you see, the bane of all side-scrolling players gets introduced. The dreaded bottomless pit. Up until now, the only things that could kill you were the monkeys flailing their arms around. Not anymore. Not only is there death pits now, but also timed platforms with bursting fire from below. And of course the screen is fairly small, so it's easy to accidentally fall from high up onto something dangerous. And don't you just love platforms you need to reach through jumping on non-respawning enemies, so if you miss the jump you have to kill yourself to try again? Yeah, they're my favorite too. The level also introduces these flying enemies. They're not really so bad, as you can still jump on them to kill them, and the movement is pretty predictable. We should be happy about that, since that's a convenience that's not gonna last for very long. Okay, so what groovy thing did I just pick up? Well, like any good game, there's a super secret bonus world you can get to by collecting every one of these 1970s tokens. There's 3 in the entire game, and the 3 of them are hidden in 3 different worlds throughout the game. So keep a good eye for them, as they're by far the rarest to find items in the entire game. And missing just one would be quite a shame, right? Right? Yeah. Right. But as you can see, the challenge gets pretty boosted from here on out, and there's a lot of levels to get through. As a little kid, this is usually as far as I would tend to get. But now that I've grown older and have gotten a lot better, I only die most of the time. So let's keep going to the next world. There's nothing in this bonus level outside of a headache anyways. But not before another cutscene. Disclaimer, squeamish people should leave. The following footage features itchy sauce and exposition. That's disgusting, Klaymen. Don't eat your eye boogers. Let's play a little game. Try to guess what's beneath this lid. Yeah, I'm sure most of you could figure that one out.
Dear Klaymen, thank you for responding to my call so promptly. That wicked Klogmonkey has got my people working on a deadly weapon called Evil Engine Number 9. He's going to use it to blow up the Neverhood. Enclosed is a sacred root that will help you when you need it most. Sincerely, Jerry-O. P.S. Do not eat of the root, or you will break out in painful, itchy sores.
Oh god, get that off the screen immediately. Jesus. Well, after that riveting plot synopsis and introduction of Chekhov's route, we move on to Snow. Here we find another pickup, Slappy the hamster. Slappy works much like you would expect any hamster to. He dribbles up and flies around Klaymen as a shield, and after a certain amount of time has passed, he disappears. Pretty useful in a game where you most of the time die in one hit. Supposedly they just took the office hamster and put it in the game. Shame the scorpion didn't get the same attention though. Anyways, as for enemies, Snow is riddled with snowblows that shoot giant snowball cannons and are a pain in the ass to avoid. And of course, all while this murdering is going on, we're treated to angelic yodeling. We also get literally timed platforms, also a barrel of fun to platform on. Otherwise there's not really much to talk about here, aside from the fact that I make some pretty stupid deaths as usual. So let's move on to the bonus level, since this one is actually kind of tough. You're forced to bounce around on these floating blobs that disappear after jumping on them, while enemies are on opposite sides shooting at you, who you can't even defend yourself against or really control your jumps all too well to avoid their attacks. And if you die in a bonus level, that's it, move on. So, moving on. Next up we have the Skullmonkeys brand hot dogs, or Skullmonkeys brand hot dog factory, as the end sticker says.
Hey look, the hot dog highway. Beep beep. Beep beep.
I gotta be honest, I hate this world. While I don't usually mind walking through sewage and going down the hot dog highway, I am in no way a fan of levels where you need to stay still on a slowly moving forward platform. It's kind of dull, and if you die along the way then it's just even more tedious since you can't just rush through it again. And the finicky jumping can make it really easy to fall off. The good thing is that this doesn't count as a bottomless pit, so if you have a halo you can still make a recovery. Also, my Mario comparison from before is really starting to pay off, since we've got piranha plants coming out of the pipes now as part of the enemy roster. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry, pipe cleaners. No plagiarism intended. Thankfully, the next level did just of river fording in favor of pipe mania amazing about. I can't really put my finger on it, but something about the look of this level just isn't really doing it for me. It feels a bit too repetitive maybe. Also, things get pretty dangerous in the last level of the world, as it's actually kinda tough to keep on the platform while avoiding the flying about monkeys. And now we make it to... oh god. Yeah, welcome to the second boss. Where do I even begin with this guy? You thought putting the office hamster into the game was weird? How about the head of one of the developers as the body for a boss? Not even the head of the boss, the body! He's even specifically credited in the opening. Yeah, see? Joe had Joe Sanabria, doing the still photos. Alright, well let's see what having a head for a body can do for you in terms of attack. What the fuck? What is it with games and using duplicating eyeballs as projectiles anyways? And honestly, these eyes are a pain in the ass to avoid. Personally, I think he's by far the hardest boss in the game. It takes a really long time for him to get vulnerable, especially at the last hit point. And as usual, you get hit once and you have to start all over. And look at his mix-up of attacks here, but it can still trip you up if you're not too careful. However, he is totally beatable, and after about 7 tries we finally make it onto the next world. Elevated Structure of Terror. Oh boy. So now we're back to bottomless pits offing us every other second, but this world actually introduces a cool new gimmick. Tiny Klaymen. We also get a new power up, the Universe Enemy. When used, it kills every single enemy shown on the screen. I don't think I've ever heard of a more gross yet awesome sounding name for a weapon. And using it is just... so fantastic. Though it sadly does fall under the category of too awesome to use, since you can only carry a maximum of 7 at a time, and they're pretty rare to come by, so you don't use it since you don't know if you might need it more later on, and trust me, you're probably going to need it more later on. This level is pretty damn tough though. The tiny Klaymen gimmick makes them way slower to move around, and thus it can become pretty tricky to dodge these El Barfo monkeys that puke their own guts out. Literally. It sorta reminds me of this clip from The Simpsons. No context needed. Or maybe it's more like Xavier, I don't know, best not to think about it too much. We also get green monkeys that spawn glowing deadly orbs after exploding. Best to just avoid jumping on these in the first place. But after a lot of pain and falling, we finally make it to the next world, where we will actually meet different enemies from the Skullmonkeys for once. Also notice that if you use a password, your score gets reset, so if you wanna go for bragging rights for some reason, then you have to beat it all in one sitting. I think it's time for another cutscene now though. I love how the look of Itsnag in the cutscenes are so radically different looking from any of the actual in-game levels. The plain flat field has a certain charm to it though. So now we're introduced to Huntmonkey, an assistant of the Huntmonkey, your standard George and Lenny duo. They're also entirely existent in this cutscene only, so who really cares what their names are?
Hey.
I mean, if that's what you're into, Klaymen, then I ain't judging. He looks so depressed he accidentally killed that Victoid. Not sure who to feel more sorry for here. Hell yeah. That cutscene was a bit misleading, since we're now actually in Ynt territory, which are these giant flying bug-like workers. Or rather, some of them fly, and unlike the flying Skullmonkeys, which gladly implode once spot-to-hit contact gets made, these guys are completely deadly to the touch, making them probably the worst enemies in the entire game by a large margin. Because there's just no way to do anything about them unless you expend your precious ammo, which you don't get back if you do end up dying and need to start over from a checkpoint, so you only feel like you want to use it when it's completely necessary, which is constantly when these guys are around. Thankfully you do get introduced to a new helping buddy here, the Glidey Bird, and a few of you who have already played this might be thinking, hang on, that's not the first time that guy makes an appearance. He shows up in the regular version of the second level, and you're right, he does. The thing is, in all the years I've played this game, it dawned on me that I've never gone into the normal teleport balls when given the chance. I guess when I get presented with the opportunity for higher risk, higher rewards, my instinct kicks in and tells me to take the challenge. So I had no idea it made an appearance this early until I decided to play through every level for this video. It's honestly a pretty awesome power up too. It's fun to glide around and makes for interesting new platform challenges. Especially with the geysers pushing you up with it. Jesus, look at some of these narrow sections though. It really just barely gives you enough room to maneuver. I do like the environment at least, and that bass line in the music is pretty rad. Oh, and in case you'd like to sing along with any of these songs, the Neverhood fan site hosts all of the official lyrics. So now you know. Come on, come on. Yeah. Oh well, should be fine so long as I don't mess up this super easy jump. Here's a pretty good reason for why the bullets were put into the game. God, look at the wiggle room allowed here. I mean, it's a pretty fun challenge, but damn. Wow, looking back on the footage, I was yelling at myself to just animate them. I honestly can't believe I made that jump unscathed. Okay, I know I said this level looked pretty, but this is getting a bit repetitive now. Would you believe me if I told you all this footage was from 5 different levels? This world could really use some more variety in its visuals. Christ, finally, about time. Was getting sick of this place. And this is another evil bonus room containing enemies. What are you talking about? There are clearly enemies here. Not worth it. Let's just keep going. Okay, so on to the next world. The Ynt Mines. Yeah, I hope you weren't expecting Skullmonkeys in your Skullmonkeys game. We've now completely sidetracked over into Ynts being the primary enemies. This is another level that I'm not that big a fan of. Mostly because there's now spikes everywhere, like it's Mega Man or something. And the levels feel a bit lacking in personality. Which is not to criticize the graphics, as they sure do at least make a cave level look pretty still. But it just feels a bit bland. I do like the different color schemes though. And if you're into sadism, then yeah, perfect level. How about... no. The song is also not particularly memorable, at least in my opinion. This almost feels like the downtime part of the game. Perfect case of the mid-air controls feeling a bit too loose. It's hard to place yourself atop a platform without overshooting at times. The nice thing is that it's at least only 3 short levels. The bonus room is also pretty free about giving up its items, so let's move on. Ynt Weeds. Yeah, this is Pit City again. This level however has great atmosphere, both in music and looks. That giant moon in the back is great, and this rain effect is amazing. We also get the final item the game has to give us. Super Willy.
Hello.
Sup? Super Willy is an interesting item. When used he just grabs everything on the screen for you. Kind of like the opposite of Universe Enema. I wouldn't really say it's the most useful power, as it's incredibly situational. But they sure do make interesting use out of it once in a while. God, that face gives me the willies. Try to take a guess what this blue laser does. Yep. And yeah, this world isn't any easier. Especially this. This is just sadistic. You have no idea how tight the timing is on this unless you've played it yourself. And this is just the perfect place to start running out of lives. Man, don't you just wish you had an opportunity to grind up extra lives? Well, Skullmonkeys does something I don't think I've ever seen before. You see, when you get to the end of the final level in this world, you actually get another Super Willy, and then a choice of restarting the level over so you can repeatedly get the free 1-ups placed midway through the level, as well as 6 green bullets along the way. Only problem is, you have to get through this every time. Twice? What a genuinely interesting idea. The game gives you a legit way to farm lives, but at a great risk in that it's really hard level to get through without dying. I mean, so long as you don't die more than 3 times, you at least don't make a net loss. But it's also just pretty time consuming as well. You really have to decide with yourself whether or not it's worth spending the time farming. I'd say if you're new, then it definitely is. You're gonna be happy later on that they gave you this chance. Alright, 38 lives, 7 volleys, that's all I can muster. Moving on. Finally, the last Ynt level. Ynt Eggs. Oh boy, Ynt Eggs. A new climbing mechanic gets introduced. While I appreciate them trying to spice up the gameplay, these vines are just more of a hassle than anything. Again, I am more than happy the game gives you bullets to use, just a shame I'm a complete dumbass at jumping at times. Get used to seeing these flying Ynty boys all over this world. They're pretty much the only enemies you'll see here. Remember how much variety and personality there was to each set of enemies from the earlier levels? Yeah, now it's just purple and green bug guys giving you your daily dose. Not to say that it's necessarily bad, but it does have the effect of making the game feel more like a slog to get through. These Ynt levels are where the difficulty spike truly sets in, but also some of the most dull levels in the game. It's quite the conundrum, and you're just happy to get them over with in the end. God, I hate climbing these vines. Not that it's necessarily hard to avoid the Ynts, but it's just really slow and feels like a chore to go up through. Especially if you've died a couple of times, then you're just trying to hurry it up so you can get on to the next section again. but that just means more dying. Blah. Yeah, I blame the jump button for that one. The music in this world is a bit bland for the first 2 levels, but once it finally kicks in proper, it's honestly one of the best tracks in the game. It really emanates a very tranquil feel while again bringing back the unsettling alien presence to the world. And I'm not even gonna bother with this one. Please, bonus room, take me home to safety. I miss my Skullboy pals. This one has a guessing game at the end between 3 platforms throwing you into teleport balls. I clearly got the short end of the stick here. Third boss fight, with entirely new gameplay on top as well, that only makes an appearance in this single level. That's a bit of a theme with Skullmonkeys. It's like they put a lot of effort into making a gameplay roulette, but then barely explored the extra gameplay segment's potentials. Not that I really mind, I'm not personally the biggest fan of platform games that suddenly throw you into vehicles for half of the game, but I would like to have seen maybe a little bit more of this shooting segment at least. It's an easy boss anyways, at least if you're not an idiot, as it clearly telegraphs his attacks and doesn't do much of anything else. You shoot him in the legs, then in the face, and down he goes eventually. Again, compared to the monstrosity that is Joehead Joe, this guy is maybe a bit bland. But let's move on to Monk Rushmore, because of course there's a Monk Rushmore. And already this level is bursting with personality again. We have a batshit crazy song with wacky lyrics, we're high up in the clouds, and again got our lovely monkey friends back. The monkey friends have even now been upgraded to the same level of lethality as the Ynts. So that of course means things aren't going to get much easier. Well okay, this world isn't as difficult as anything we saw in the Ynt levels. They somehow managed to not cluster all of the enemies together in the same bullshit way. Well, some of the things are a bit tough, but that's why you get the anime after all. More like worth. And here we have the wonderful monument, and what a view it is. And on the left, hidden away in the cruelest way possible, we find the last 1970s token. Wait, what? The last? Yeah, I could have sworn I should have all 3 by now. To be sure, I looked up a walkthrough, and sure enough, the 1970s ball should be at the end of the bonus level here. So where did I miss the last one? Well, it's not the last one I missed. It's the first one, in the monkey shrines. It even has the sign by it to tell you what purpose they serve. You might be thinking, how the hell did he miss that? Well, remember what other noteworthy thing was in that level? That's right, a teleport ball, literally half a minute in before you encounter the 1970s. I honest to goodness do not understand the design philosophy here. The teleport ball sends you to the exact same place that the normal one at the end does, so why is it here? Just to screw people up who might be tempted to jump into it, then getting denied the 1970s bonus world for no reason? It's not even like the way it's well hidden in Monk Rushmore. That I at least can understand. That's a legit secret. This is however just bullshit for the sake of being bullshit. It serves no other purpose. And I of course can't deny one of the greatest group of levels in video game history, so I of course played through the entire game again just to show this off. Don't worry, it didn't take as long this time around. So here we are, back half a century to the wonderful world of the 1970s. Cue the music.
Groovy. Out of sight. Cool. Shake your groove thing. Get funky. Groovy.
super groovy.
Oh yeah, right now.
Thank God the music is as fly as you would hope for. And there's no enemies at all in this level. It's nothing but pure platforming goodness. Thankfully so, because you only get one chance at getting through the 70s. Puts a lot of pressure on you, but while these platforms that push you around can be a bit tricky, it's not nearly as difficult as you would think. Better make good use out of those fart heads though. It is pretty difficult to keep your eyes focused on such visually stunning levels, especially this one, what a trip. And yet again, this just keeps adding to the game's charm. What other game would have something this ridiculous as a bonus world? And it's filled with goodies too, especially if you make it to the final level. Then you're not only treated to 37 extra lives, but the close-up of one hunk of a man with the most stylish shirt ever. What a legend. Damn, look at that one-up bonus. Smooth sailings from here. But sadly, that's not our current run. This was after all a simple side trip. To us the 70s never even happened, so let's just keep going. Soar ahead, another hilarious world title. This is another level that I'm not a big fan of. You know how in like, say, Crash Bandicoot's Polar levels, if you miss a crate then you're forced to kill yourself so you can return to the latest checkpoint, because there's no other way to return back and get that crate? Well, Soar ahead is a downwards vertical level, something you don't see very often, and is a pain in the ass to get every swirly queue in, because there's not enough platforms to let you go back up from where you fall. And it's a really wide level, so it's not possible to get everything in one go. And you kind of have to know where the swirly queues are ahead of time, because if you make it to the end of the level or a checkpoint where you can't get the swirly queues again, that's it, you're forced to start the world over. And while we're at it, I would just like to point out that the secret ending you get for collecting all the swirly queues does not get nullified if you use a password, nor are you disqualified if you don't start from Skullmonkey Gate, as my winning run didn't start from Skullmonkey Gate and has now been using passwords twice. So I'd just like to shoot down some of those falsehoods I've seen floating around, because they've been really bothering me. Anyways, like I've said, I'm not really a big fan of this world. It has another cool moon in the back, and I kind of like that it gives you both the glidey bird and makes you small, but other than that it's simple and kind of a dull level. It doesn't even play the little bonus room song while you're in the bonus room. Though it is pretty satisfying finally getting to stomp all over these purple jerks that have been bothering you for a while now. Moving on. Shards is up next. Because I guess we needed another version of Ynt Mines with monkeys as well. It's your standard run-of-the-mill level, full of spikes and floating butt-bounce immune enemies. Looks really pretty though, and the song is the main menu music, which makes for great catharsis when you finally get this far and hear the music in its intended context. I also love the color of this place. The purple shine of these gems is just wonderful. Some of these completely ordinary jumps are way too tight though. But otherwise it's a fairly uneventful level, that's not even close in terms of difficulty compared to the Ynts. So long as you're stocked up on enemas and green bullets, you should be able to get rid of the majority of obstacles in your way here. This bonus room however is so satisfying. It's been a while since we've had a cutscene, so how about a little bit of Slappy the Hamster?
Silly, isn't he?
I guess that was a cautionary tale for people lacking eyeballs. I'm sure somebody can relate. So, if you were to ask me what my favorite world in the game is, I'd probably have to go with Castle de los Muertos for two reasons. One, this level looks absolutely gorgeous. I mean, just look at all this red. And two, just listen. I mean, what is this music? What is it? It sounds like modern shitposting, but it's just a background track to a normal level in a 2D side-scroller. And after you've told that to whoever else is in the car you're blasting the music from, they ask, well, is it a level full of Mexican food then? Which isn't too far out there to assume. You reply, no, it's a castle level. Duh! I love this so much. The soundtrack is half what defines the game, and I'm so glad Doug just let someone like Terry do whatever the hell he wants with their game. He knows best after all. Oh, right, there's an actual level here I have to talk about. Okay, so like I said before, this level is really pretty thanks to the background effect, the silhouetted environment, the lighting cast from the candles, it's all good stuff. But at the same time, this lack of lighting makes everything blend in a bit too much. It can for one be hard to tell where the checkpoints are at. You just kind of accidentally fall on them, and it's not easy to decipher where the walking line on the platforms go, with stuff in the foreground and background popping up as well. There's also 2 new enemies introduced, as well as a new mechanic. We got these butt stabbing guys that just periodically stab at thee from holes in the ground. The Neverhood fan site says to not trust little holes you see around the place, which I think is generally really good advice. We also got these screaming infernos that I'm surprised aren't called screaming chimpfernos. Or maybe infernape? I guess that one would have been a little too obvious. I mean, these writers clearly have standards. They're some of the only enemies in the game that are completely invincible to anything you throw at them, but are also fairly predictable, so that balances it out. Although mixed up with these slippery roofs, these bouncing blobs and also your slightly delayed jump, does make them a bit of a challenge to time right. Then we have the new mechanic, these platforms rolling forward when landed upon. They're not really so bad, you just have to keep on your toes and be careful not to overshoot your jumps. Honestly, Castle de los Muertos isn't that hard of a level, but it's a fun one full of personality I always look forward to playing through. Time for the bonus room. It's really easy though, thankfully. It's comprised entirely of these rolling platforms, which I've already said are simple enough to make through. Okay, on to the boss fight. Much like the preceding level, the Monkey Mage looks really awesome, and as demonstrated immediately, these platforms are really tiny. But if you can stick the landing, he's honestly a really easy boss. He sometimes loses his shield and then you have to quickly hit him with the rear end before it's greeted by a burning ring. But I mean, just look at this. If you time it right, he doesn't even get a chance to do his attack. I guess he graduated from the Toadman school of boss fights. Now we've reached the incredible Drivy run. Or is it the Drivy run? Anyways, this is yet another new gameplay format that is entirely contained within this world. And there's only one level in this world excluding the bonus room. So it really boggles the mind with why they even bothered to make it. I guess at this point the variety helps to spice things up a bit. Unfortunately though, this level is an auto-scroller, as the incredible Drivy run cannot be stopped, something even the fansite laments. Man, they sure put a lot of effort into this character, I must say. But yeah, auto-scroller level. The same exact comments I had about the swirly cues in Soar Head applies here as well. Not a fan. Other than that, it's a fairly fun level. Kind of nice to get a break, but it can still be a bit of trouble at times with these super bomber monks. And you need the standard quick reflexes to avoid your bottomless pits and spikes along the way. Par for the core stuff, honestly. And once you make it to the end with all swirly cues, you're automatically thrown into the bonus room, which has a nice pleasant green tint to it and plenty of extra lives. Okay, enough fooling around. Worm Graveyard. Don't worry, we're almost at Klogg, and then this madness can finally end. Worm Graveyard I assume is called that since Terry must have hired some of Team 17's worms for their melodic voices. Honestly, a great song. It's also a level with plenty of challenges, as we're back to having small platforms going down through spikes in the floor, and hey, more screaming infernapes. Though surprisingly most of the flying enemies are the flappy kind you can bounce on, which does kind of make things a heck of a lot easier for the most part. Well, sometimes they get creative with it. This feels like the only place that Cousin Willy is really required at. Oh well, I have more lives than Willy's anyways. No, that was so cheap, there was clearly no inferno. Welcome to the game's final bonus room. Who really gives a shit? Let's just move on to the final boss. Klogg. Sorry to disappoint, but there's no cutscene for this occasion. I mean, the end of the Neverhood was amazing thanks to their confrontation.
I'm sorry. Did I frighten you? My name is Klogg.
And I'd imagine Klogg would have a lot to say to Klaymen right now. Maybe Glowed will shout some curses. But no, Klaymen is just suddenly there in a... thing. And they're fighting. There's not even any boss music. Whatever, let's just beat him for good this time. Surprisingly enough, the final boss introduces yet another new gameplay mechanic that isn't used anywhere else in the game. Which I'm not a fan of. I feel like the final boss of a game should be testing the game's main gameplay formula, since that's what you've been practicing all the way through. Anyways, at least it's better than just clicking on someone's head. So how does the fight play? Well, it's sort of a mix between that alien guy from Mario Land, which amusingly enough also ends with a vehicle boss, and the standard King K rule wait for the boss to sabotage themselves by providing the bullet that kills them. You move Klaymen and the tuba around on the ground, catching the clay bullets Klogg drops and shoot them back up on him. Except here it's just even more ridiculous, because at least in the Mario Land fight you have to put yourself in harm's way in order to shoot the Tonga. But with Klogg you can just stay on the sides completely avoiding his shots, waiting for him to drop the clay ball and send it back. And that's all there is to the fight. It's a bit of a letdown. I guess you could say that he really dropped the ball on this one. So, Klogg is dead, but we can't celebrate yet. Surprisingly enough, he was not a load-bearing boss, as Evil Engine number 9 is still poised to go off. Oh, so that's what an Evil Engine is. Kind of amazing these monkeys managed to make this thing in such a short span of time. How long did it even take Klaymen to get here? Why couldn't he just fly all the way here? So yeah, this means there's actually another world to play, making the Evil Engine number 9 the true final boss, which is really bizarre. First of all, the manual actually lies, claiming that the game ends when you beat Klogg. I can't tell if this is intended misdirection or just a mistake on the part of whoever wrote the manual. I mean, it doesn't really come as a surprise considering the previous world end screen revealed there still was another world to go. Second, this actually means my prior complaint about the game ending with the gimmick is nullified. Now we have plenty of more jumping challenges in what is considered the hardest level in an already brutally difficult platforming game. And third, it's kind of odd to just have an extra world to go through after you've beaten the final boss. It kind of takes out the satisfaction of beating Klogg. You can see why other games tend to end off with a final boss and not a last set of levels. I mean, sure, there's some games that end with a final escape after you've beaten the final boss, but that still feels like an extension of the confrontation, as well as giving a sense of urgency.
It's not over yet!
Here it's just a bit awkward. Still, it's definitely better than if the game had just ended after that pathetic Klogg fight. Well, no more stalling. Time to finish the fight. So here we are in the engine, and yeah, the most peculiar thing about this world is the music, if it can even be called that. It's more just a collection of sounds from an industrial factory put together in a chaotic mess. There's hardly any rhythm or structure to it. Technically it sounds like a baby's first song in FL Studio, and it far stands out in a soundtrack that's already as unique as it gets. And yet, to be perfectly honest, something about this song really manages to make me uncomfortable, like it's way too unsettling. It legitimately makes the place you're in sound evil and oppressive, and it perfectly fits with the evilness of Evil Engine number 9. God, I can't handle anymore. It's too much. Make the noise stop already! Oh, at last. Oh, please no. Alright, I'll get serious again for a moment. Wait, what? What are you telling me? There's an alternative rock band founded in 1998 called Evil Engine number 9? And they admit they just stole the name from Skullmonkeys? And they disbanded in 2009? Well, alright, let's hear some of the music. So yeah, if this is something you're into, then so as I mentioned before, this is generally considered the hardest level in the game. I read a lot of comments from people who said that they could make it this far in the game, but never made it through the evil engine. Why is this? Well, it's all thanks to these things. It's your typical time platforming hell littered all over the stages. However, surprisingly enough, the flying monkeys featured in this level you actually can't jump on, so they don't really pose that big of a threat. And even if they do, you're more than likely to have plenty of resources left to take them down. But you don't get any items to help with your platforming. That you just have to get good at. I mean, you can use the fart heads to at least mitigate losing some lives, but you still have to be able to make these jumps in the first place. And some of them are really difficult. Here's a little tangent for you. As a kid, I was never able to beat the game from the start. I would get to the elevated structure of terror, and that was about as far as I'd make it before giving up. But one time, while typing in random passwords, I ended up at Klogg and went on to beat the game. I of course can't prove this, as it was many years ago, and I honestly have a hard time believing I managed to beat it myself, because even now I still have problems with the final jump of this game. Here it is, the objectively hardest, most difficult part of the entire game. This might as well be the final boss, because this final jump is borderline impossible to make. There are no enemies to avoid, no spikes in the way, no gliding bullshit. You just have to make this insanely precise and tight jump in the most narrow possible time. Just look at this compilation. It is so hard to make this gap. You have to hurry since you get just barely enough time, and you have to jump from the absolute edge of the platform while it's moved to the edge of the right side. All of these things need to match up, and there's nothing you can do to improve your chances. You just have to not fuck it up. And on top of that, I'm starting to burn out of lives here. Come on, please just make it already. Ugh, I really don't want to game over and have to redo all of this. Just make it already, me. Finally, it's over. I would in any other circumstance say that this is a pretty anticlimactic way to end things, but when the final jump of your game is this nerve-wracking, nothing feels more satisfying to accomplish at this point. I need a cigarette, I don't even smoke. Oh yeah, remember that route from like 13 worlds ago? Thank God we just happened to get a hold of that. Clearly nothing else could have saved the day. The fact that the evil engine is seemingly sentient kind of makes this weird. Poor thing. Looks like dinner time, yet again. How poetic. The game started with a bad man falling from the sky, and the game ends with a good man falling from the sky. At least he still has his camera to keep him busy. Now we can celebrate.
Klogg is dead and we want to celebrate it. He's pushing up daisies of form rambulated. Bad guy asks why we're related. Well, Klogg is dead. Follow the bouncing skull.
Yes, Klogg is kaput, no longer operating. Try to fight we see some, but it's the...
Do a pelvic thrust. Klogg is dead. He was dirty and obscene, and not a little mean. So we'll sing in one accord. Now that he's gone to his reward. Klogg is dead, he's history. Why we shake our booties, no mystery. He's gone at last. Time has passed. We can go back to passing gas.
I feel now is a good time to point out this high quality fan art of this girl. Link in the description.
Yeah, Klogg is dead.
What a perfect way to end your game. And there was the secret ending gotten from collecting every swirly cue. A prize well worth the effort. Otherwise the game just ends with Klaymen floating through space, which is kind of a bummer. So anyways, here's the high score I got when I quickly ran through the game again in one sitting. Feel free to try and beat it yourself, let me know how well it goes. And then it just goes back to the main menu. So that's pretty much it. That's all of Skullmonkeys covered. It was quite the mouthful, but I felt it was important to go over every single aspect of the game, as well as giving a sense of length in order to discuss the things it does right and the problems it has. I wanna now specifically point out IGN's review of the game, since I think it's hilarious. They originally gave the game a 6 out of 10, with a lot of wishy-washy comments. I do want to point out that in 2008, IGN gave the game a new review, looking much more fondly back at it with a pretty good 8 out of 10 score. But that doesn't mean Adam Douglas here gets off easy with his questionable review. Here's some great highlights. The plot synopsis. You control Klaymen, who has returned from the PC title to save his home world from the evil monster, Klogg. Klogg has recruited the help of the Skullmonkeys, gorilla-like beasts with skulls for heads from the planet Yntis. He then mentions that it has a basic intuitive interface that's remarkably easy to learn. Okay, it's a 2D platformer. What other 2D platformers have you played that have had a confusing interface? Oh yeah, don't get too confused by Mario World's HUD. I know there's a lot of numbers to keep track of, but you'll get used to it, don't worry. Then we have the release a decoy Klaymen to distract the tougher baddies. That's not exactly what it does. It's more an item for not losing a life or avoiding having to go back to the Blades checkpoint if you die. But sure, I get what you mean. Then we have the fact that the game all looks so alike, saying that most enemies just consist of jumping Skullmonkeys or ones that are on fire. I hope I did a good enough job showcasing the variety of Skullmonkeys in the game, to let you be aware that this is completely asinine. If anything, he should complain about the Ynts being too samey, but he has 0 comments about them. Then he says the levels are remarkably similar, saying that after you pass the jungle level with its floating platforms and Skullmonkeys, you proceed to the factory level with its remarkably similar floating platforms and Skullmonkeys. First of all, what jungle level? What, in Death Garden? The level featuring entirely new enemy types? With a floating bird to help and geysers that push you up? And in fact takes place 4 levels after the factory level, which features none of the things in the jungle level, instead having unique flaming platforms that are only found in that world. And then we have this comment which is featured in a lot of these reviews. And with 120 of these levels, it gets old fast. Let's look at just how many levels you will be playing through the game on a normal run. And we won't count bonus rooms as they're exactly what they say on the can, just bonuses. World 1 has 4 levels, one split path between 2 levels, meaning you only have to play through one of them. I typed up these statistics for every world in the game in an Excel spreadsheet, including what worlds feature a boss. If we then count up how many regular levels are in the game, we get 68. But then, if you take into account all the split paths, you push it down to only 55 levels that are mandatory to get through. If we then add together all of the bosses, 2 levels from World 0, the 5 1970s levels, the 17 bonus rooms, and lastly the amazing Drivy, that is still only 85 levels. This 120 is completely over-exaggerated and makes the game sound a lot longer and more tedious than it actually is. So if this guy's argument is that the game feels too long for its own need, I can certainly see where that criticism is coming from, but just saying the level count as if that's a legitimate issue shows a great amount of ignorance and completely avoids the real issue. Skullmonkeys is a technically long game, but it can be beaten in easily 3 hours if you don't bother with any of the bonus levels, shorter if you're actually competent at the game. That's approximately 20 seconds per level, and it can get even shorter if you're really good at the game. Most speedruns push it down to around a single hour playtime, so I honestly wouldn't say that the game is that long, but I can agree that it is a lot of the same thing over and over again. The real issue here isn't that the game feels too long, it's that the gameplay just doesn't have enough to make it stand out. For one thing, games in this period were trying to push new envelopes for what 2D platformers could do. Some expanded on the formula of prior games, helping to create new innovations that would evolve subgenres that are so sickeningly popular these days. Others would play with unique gameplay mechanics, throwing new stuff out there or shaking things up, or evolving the cinematic aspects of games to create a more seamless movie experience and engaging the player into a convincing world. Saying that 2D games died down with the advent of 3D is wrong. Even on the PS2, worthwhile 2D games would continue to show up, with niche status sure, but always bringing something new to the table. And yet, evidently, Skullmonkeys ended up selling only okay, and went into obscurity shortly after. According to video game charts, Skullmonkey sold reportedly only 0.13 million units, though you should definitely take this with a grain of salt. In an interview done around the release of Skullmonkeys in, I assume, Game Fan magazine, I got these off of the Neverhood fan site, so thanks Mr. X for the archive. Anyways, here Doug laments the fact that people playing the game aren't really showing the interest for it, and are rather pitying the team due to already assuming that the game won't sell well. Doug talks about how only the Japanese gaming market seems to really be interested in the Neverhood franchise at this point, and sales there alone would be enough to make a profit. Again, take this chart with a grain of salt. He complains about how games these days have to be crass and with a dirty sense of humor, and how only 3D is enough to sell a game, no matter if the gameplay is even fun or not. He also has a lot of complaining about DreamWorks and how they put all the marketing behind a game like Jurassic Park Worlds, which, to be fair, is a steaming pile of dog shit, while ignoring passionate projects like Skullmonkeys. He also points out that Spielberg is apparently a pretty based gamer, and Doug also credits Parappa as a great influence for him, which I thought was amusing to hear. Hey look, there's Joehead Joe. So now the question is, why did Skullmonkeys fail to impress? Well, let's compare to the best-selling 2D platformer on the system. No, not that one. This one. Good old Rayman. Now, the comparison is probably not entirely fair in any way. Rayman was after all a launch title, and was of course originally developed for the Jaguar. Well, okay, originally the SNES, but whatever. I still think there's a good comparison here of what Rayman does right, while Skullmonkeys does wrong. Both games are gorgeous, with bulging personalities. Both games have fantastic soundtracks, and are insanely difficult. Rayman definitely more so. Yet, both games don't really do anything very innovative. Take away the gimmick of Rayman being limbless, which is in and of itself only an aesthetic aspect anyways, and roughly speaking it's a pretty standard platformer. You just jump around on floating platforms and try not to die. In fact, I would say Skullmonkeys tries some more interesting things to avoid falling into the same levels of frustration that Rayman possesses, allowing for different ways to dispose of obstacles. But what does Rayman then have that Skullmonkeys doesn't? Well, how about a world map? How about memory card saves? Yeah, I know it seems pretty trivial and are things that shouldn't matter as much, but think about it for a second. If you have a world map, you get the chance to go back to previous levels and play through them again. Maybe there was a fun level you just want to play over and over. Maybe listen to its music on repeat. Maybe you missed some swirly cues and you would like the opportunity to go back and get all of the ones you missed. Maybe you missed the fucking 1970s and would want to go back and get it. Maybe you would like to try the alternate levels and worlds, or like to find every single secret in the game. Well, if you had a world map, you could very easily do so anytime you wanted. Sure, you could also just take down the passwords for every world, and nowadays it's easy to just look up passwords or take photos of the result screen along the way. But back in 1998, nobody wanted to deal with passwords anymore. Shit fills up paper and it's just a hassle to write down on and take care of. And also if you have memory card saves, then it feels much more welcoming to take a break and come back later if the game is being frustrating. Seriously, we don't have to talk about Rayman for this example. Super Mario World and Donkey Kong featured world maps. Hell, Crash Bandicoot gave a world map that keeps track of progress towards 100% completion, thus letting the player go back and replay levels to get the gems they missed, adding to the replay value. Maybe go back to the Insanity Beach to farm for lives for the later harder stages.
Now I have to go back to get more lives after that. I mean, I have like none left, right? I have to go back.
The effects of having the game be completely linear from level to level to level feels like a dated design choice that makes it more like a chore to sit through than anything. Honestly, if these reviewers had just gotten the option to go back out to the world map, save their game, then take a break and come back to it later, they probably would have looked at it much more favorably, and not whined about the game having too much content. Maybe that's just me being too optimistic though. The reality is probably just that by 1998, nobody did actually care about 2D games. But Skullmonkeys is far too unique to dismiss, simply for lacking a depth perception. It's a game full of style and personality that might not rock the world with its gameplay, but is more a case of enjoying an artistic experience. What these reviewers fail to appreciate is the polish put into everything. Enemies don't just get squished and disappear when you jump on them, no, they fucking explode!
This is the most important game design lesson I've had. How do you make good arcade games? And he told me make really big explosions, even if it makes no sense.
Checkpoints aren't just flags that make us squeal when reached, they're weird bird creatures that howl when jumped on. Why? Why not? They're fun to jump on. Music isn't just generic action music. Every track's got charm and a distinct style to them that makes the soundtrack easily recognizable. Each level feels unique and fun to reach. It's not just a factory level or just a jungle level. Hell, even the cliché sewer level still stands out by being filled with hot dogs for no other reason than it's amusing. There's more to each of them, as I've been trying to illustrate all throughout this video. Would I recommend playing the game to every person watching this? No, not at all. This is definitely only for the 2D platformer enthusiasts. I wouldn't even say it's deserving of a remake or anything, but that's why I wanted to make this video in the first place. I felt its charms needed a light shined on it, despite the gameplay not being that worth playing. The game is nowadays mostly known as, hey, did you know the Neverhood had a sequel? Crazy, right? Well, I had the opposite experience. I grew up with Skullmonkeys, and was shocked years later to find it was actually a sequel to an adventure game. and I feel it shouldn't be dismissed so easily when it has so much effort poured into it, and it shouldn't have been dismissed when it came out either. So, what happened to the Neverhood Inc. after Skullmonkeys was released? Well, you can probably already guess, but it's not going to be a happy story. I forgot to mention this by now, but the publisher River Hillsoft took care of bringing the Neverhood to the Eastern market, in the form of Klaymen Neverfudo no Naso, and Klaymen Tsu Skullmonkey no Gyakusho. And almost to prove how popular the franchise was over there, the next, and sadly last game in the Neverhood franchise would turn out to be a Japanese spin-off budget game. The sole game developed by the studio Ynt Mines. The game follows the natural progression of genres being made. First we had a point-and-click adventure game, then a side-scrolling platformer, and finally an air hockey game. Yeah, an air hockey game, but not just any air hockey game. It's Klaymen Gun-Hockey. Yeah, this is probably one of the most bizarre games to come into existence. It's almost just Neverhood in name only. I mean, it has the characters, but as you'll see it lacks the visual style, and it definitely lacks the music. The whole soundtrack just sounds like something plucked straight out of a cheap JRPG. I kind of like it in a really awful charming way, but it gets pretty repetitive quickly. Alright, so the game is pretty bare bones. It only has a versus mode and a story mode. Yes, there's an actual story mode, but unfortunately I don't have the time to sit around and translate it myself, and I'm not really holding my hopes out for somebody else to get around to it either. I can take my guess as to what the plot is about though. Klaymen creates a party game to pass the time, and then it's just go-karting with Bowser from there on out. You go through the story mode, first battling Willy, then Weasel and Hobbuck from the Neverhood, then Klogg, then Hobbuck, then Weasel again. Are you seeing a pattern here? Yeah, there's only 8 levels and you just fight each character twice. It's not like it really matters anyways, since there's no gameplay difference between each character. The tables you play on at least change, so it's not like there's no variety. It just gets a bit draining after a while because, well, you'll see. I've been dancing around the elephant in the room for far too long now. Klaymen's face. No, I'm of course talking about the gameplay. How in the world is air hockey different to gun hockey, I hear you ask? Well, for starters, you have a gun. The gun aims at the puck automatically, all you have to do is choose when to shoot and what angle you shoot from. But the bullets only affect the puck if it's on your side of the table. You're free to spam the trigger, but it can feel pretty inconsistent when the puck is actually hit or not. Seems simple, right? Yep. Well, at least the developers realized this too, so they spice things up a bit by having power-ups pop up around on the table that you can freely choose when to use. You've got your put up a wall, your tear down the wall, your super shot that increases the puck speed, your laser shot making your opponent's gun shoot slow, and lastly probably the worst power-up, the multi-shot. This thing is a complete and total gamble as to whether it will let you instantly win or backfire in the worst way possible. If you time it right, you can totally score 4 free points at once, but more often than not I find it hard to keep control over. You can push the L and R button to change your target, but good luck keeping track of this mess. The player to have scored the most goals at the end of the timer is the winner. If you draw, then no one is a winner, just as it should be. The game actually does get pretty hard later on, but I can't tell if it's just me being bad or the AI secretly cheating. And the game ends with what kind of looks like somewhere that could be Itsnack, which just confuses me to no end regarding the whole continuity aspect. You know, on account of Klogg being dead and all. So anyways, you beat Klogg one final time and then everybody celebrates, hooray. And then you get a bunch of silly pictures to go along with your credits. Something about this pose kind of doesn't sit right with me. Can't really say what it is though. Shockingly, there actually is a leaderboard and it lets you save your records. And yeah, I know, I only beat it on gentle, sue me. I got to the 6th stage on medium, died a few times, checked my phone in frustration and forgot about the countdown. But I'd love to see you try to beat my gentle difficulty score. So that's Klaymen Gun-Hockey. Is it fun? To be perfectly honest, I was going into this game looking to tear it apart, but after having actually played it for a bit, I gotta be honest, it is actually pretty entertaining. I mean, it's not like I'll ever play through the story mode ever again. But if I can sucker some idiot into playing the versus mode with me, I totally would for about 5 minutes. It's an interesting spin on the classic miniature Canada simulator that actually gets pretty hectic, and the different tables do give a small form of variety. but after those 5 minutes it pretty quickly loses its appeal. And the graphics do kind of look like it got transported over into the Forbidden Planet from Bubsy 3D. But it's a cheap little budget title, what did you expect? And if anything, the game is a nice little reminder of why Neverhood and Skullmonkey stands out from the crowd. If we would have gotten this as a 2D platformer, I wouldn't be wasting my time making this video. But unfortunately, this was the last game to be released in the Neverhood franchise, because Doug and his team decided to go in a completely different direction for the next game, for better or worse. Now is a good time to bring up the fact that Doug has on at least a couple of occasions pointed out how their studio works on a one-strike system. If any of their games don't do well, that's it. Spielberg can only bail you out so many times. So with that in mind, remember how I also earlier brought up that Doug complained only 3D games with a crass and dirty sense of humor are the only kind of games that still sell anymore? Well, I guess him and the others decided if you can't beat them, join them, because that pretty much describes the next game.
Welcome to BoomBots.
Don't worry, I will try to keep this brief as I'm aware of how stupidly long this video is getting. But I want to at least give BoomBots the fair shake it didn't get on its release. What's interesting about BoomBots is how completely different it is to any other Neverhood Inc. games. For one, the in-game graphics are entirely 3D, the only claymation you will get here is in the cutscenes. 2. We've now moved over into a fighting game, which also means free. This is a multiplayer game. Oh, and lastly, this is not in any way related to the Neverhood universe. Quite the sidestep, don't you think? In fact, GameFan magazine, one of the few magazines to actually sing the praises of Skullmonkeys, made it very clear how disappointed they were by the studio's decision to switch over to 3D. But they still held out hope that BoomBots would be a hit. After all, it's got a lot of wacky humor and personality like Neverhood Inc.'s previous games. The 3D graphics actually look pretty good, and the gameplay is simple and intuitive, unlike every other fighting game on the market where you need to do combos and remember moves for your characters. That's lame. Just give me a single button to press to fire projectiles. That's more fun, right? Right? Well, to be honest, the game is kind of a letdown. Unlike Klaymen Gun-Hockey, I went into this one with an open mind, wanting to be pleasantly surprised. But there's just not enough going on for it. Let's start with the positives. The game is indeed still full of personality. I like a lot of its style. This character's select screen for instance is great, and the intermission screen looks pretty slick too. Dr. Pig's changing camera angles amuse me greatly. Terry is still here with his smear on the music. Hearing his wailing in the background of techno beats is a pretty surreal experience. And as always, the animation in the cutscenes are wonderfully done. In fact, I dare say the quality is even higher than in either Neverhood or Skullmonkeys. But the actual content is not as amusing. The story is pretty bleh, the actual charm of the characters is gone and has instead been replaced by a lot of lowbrow jokes. I mean, sure, it's not like Skullmonkeys was without its fart jokes. But this time it feels like the writers aren't even trying. And a lot of the cutscenes are just kind of dull or not very worth watching. They even recycle a joke from Skullmonkeys, except they end up completely butchering the whole thing this time. I'll just skip ahead a bit.
Silly, isn't...
As for the story mode itself, it's identical for every character you play. It's literally just copy-pasting the name and the text like it's the Name Yourself JRPG. Wow, I didn't know Dr. Pig invented Klaymen. Crazy! Yes, that's right, Klaymen is actually in the game as an unlockable character. You unlock new characters by going through the story mode while being undefeated. Fair enough, wouldn't be the first game to do something like that. But the problem here is, they included memory card saves this time. And you might be thinking, wow, that's great news though. Well, You save your progress in between fights in the story mode, and there's literally nothing at all stopping you from just loading your save after you die, and then you keep your untouchable trophy, and as a result you pretty much have infinite tries. Is this cheating? Maybe. Am I gonna abuse it? Hell yeah. Cause you see, the actual combat itself is the biggest letdown, since, well, it certainly ain't no Power Stone. Each character plays pretty much the same. I don't care if the game itself claims there are slight differences, or that the Neverhood fan site says so as well. They all play identically. Square to shoot pellets, triangle for missile, circle for homing missile. Around on the arena drops these yellow balls that fill your Mongo meter, which make your projectiles stronger. But filling the whole bar lets you fire off 3 volleys of giant balls that aren't really all that useful. But the most important tool here is your throw. You see, I actually started out trying to play the game properly, but then I got thrown by the opponent. And then, as soon as I realized just how much damage the throw does, every fight from here on out was, as you can see here.
Gotcha, 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 gotcha.
This guy says gotcha more than an Ape Escape protagonist.
Gotcha!
The opponent can't get out of your throw by instantly pressing the melee button, but then you just grab them over and over again until, well, it's only about 4 or 5 grabs until they're gone. I love that I found this on my own, but then I saw that GameSpot's review pretty much outlines the exact same strategy. They also say that 2-player versus pretty much involves running away from each other for about 5 to 10 minutes, smacking missiles back and forth, which sadly sounds pretty accurate to me. And that's about the whole experience. You get a 5-second ending, and then a video of the team goofing around wrestling in the office. There's Doc jamming on a guitar. Here he is spitting on a staircase. Oh, and if this music sounds familiar, there's a good reason why, as it's used for the Impossible Quiz's main menu. That's probably what it will be remembered as for the rest of eternity. And then that's all there is. In terms of content, this isn't any better than Klaymen Gun-Hockey. There's the exact same things you can do. Go through a repetitive story mode that doesn't change it anyway, and then fight your friends. But at least Klaymen Gun-Hockey lets you keep track of your high scores to give some reason to play it again. But I don't feel compelled to play through BoomBots story mode once more, ever. And that's honestly a shame, because you can tell the game definitely comes from a very passionate team, and they clearly must have had a lot of fun making it. But something just went wrong down the line, and the sales definitely show it. As you could see from GameSpot's review, the game was critically panned and sold abysmally. And not surprisingly, the game wasn't even released in Japan this time. Which I think is the biggest shame considering how much they pretty much saved the team's ass in the past. And you can pretty clearly see why Skullmonkeys age like fine wine, while BoomBots doesn't really stand out at all. Once you get away from the cutscenes, everything that made that game special is gone. And as expected, this pretty much killed the team, which is a darn shame. The once promising studio that made 2 of the most visually stunning games ever didn't even get to go out with a banger. Despite it seeming like they were pressured into making the game out of need for survival in an at the time very cutthroat industry, from interviews it sounds like they had high hopes for its success, but the critical responses and lackluster sales has clearly taken its toll on the team. Doug retired from the games industry entirely and would go on to make a couple of short films in the form of Cockhead and Meters and Mothman. He also started a band with Ed Schofield, who I didn't really mention up until now. Sorry Ed. Anyways, Doug now does freelance animation work for various studios. Nowadays he is much more well known for being associated with Earthworm Jim, which has to be a little heartbreaking considering how he's admitted he sees Neverhood as his magnum opus. He is returning as a creative consultant on the new Earthworm Jim 4 though, whenever that is coming out for the Intellivision Amico anyways. Mike Dietz would go on to continue working for animation in a lot of big games around the block, as well as TV animation now and then. He even worked as a stop-motion animator for a Christmas special of Community. Nice. Terry would release all 3 games' soundtracks as Imaginarium, but good luck finding a cheap copy nowadays. He currently has a Patreon where he hangs out pretty often with his fans. A lot of the others from the Neverhood Inc., including Mark Lorenzen, would go on to form the ill-fated Monkeytropolis team. In fact, that team was so ill-fated, it's hard to really find much information on what they were planning to do. They wrote on their webpage they had their hands full on an Activision Extreme Sports title. And according to an IGN article, the game they started working on was Sean Palmer Pro Border 2. But that game doesn't exist. So I guess it's safe to assume that Sean Palmer's Pro Snowboarder underperforming probably led to not only the cancellation of the sequel, but also the demise of a promising team before they even had a chance to prove themselves. Then again, they were working on Sean Palmer Pro Border 2, which I'm pretty sure is a fate worse than death. But after that, Mark would go on to join Electronic Arts, where he would work on Command & Conquer Generals, as well as Lord of the Rings: The Battle for Middle-earth and its sequel. All in all, while it's sad that the team had to split, everybody thankfully moved on and found something else to do. And at least the Neverhood isn't going anywhere, and remains popular even today. A fact that was proven when in 2013 a certain Kickstarter reached a funding of almost $1 million from 18,000 backers. But that is a story for another time. Oh, it feels so good to finally have finished this video. This is a project that has been in the works for far too long now, as I've procrastinating on completing it for a very long time. Partly just because it's been hard to get into the productive mindset, but also a fear of whether or not I could even finish the thing. Sounds pretty stupid, I know, but hey, it's done now, and I can think about something other than Klaymen for once, and move on to talking about other games I want to talk about. If you watched this far, hey, thank you. Thanks so much. It really means a lot to me, to be honest. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have any feedback, then please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear ways I can improve things. And also, if you want to see more videos, then feel free to subscribe, as there will definitely be coming more out. So, until next time, bye.